You are the most aggressive and most hawkish central banker in Asia right now. Your hike rate's what, 275 basis points in the last 3 meetings. What is the outlook moving forward?
Hello, Yvonne. I think that the right way to think about monetary policy in Pakistan, and I think for that matter, a few other central banks, is in the context of the economic recovery out of COVID. And first point to note is that growth in Pakistan remains quite brisk. We expect the economy to grow 5% this fiscal year. That will end in June of 2022. This comes on the back of 4% the previous year and a contraction of about minus 0.5% in COVID. My point is first that the economy is growing quite well. In October, car sales grew about 41% year on year. Our textile exports grew about 29% and tax collections were up about 27%. So that's the first point. Second point, though, is that this economic recovery, but more importantly, the global developments, including recoveries around the world and supply chain disruptions, have caused a sharp hike in global commodity prices, which has pushed up our current account deficit as well as inflation in Pakistan. Yeah. We estimate about 60 to 70% of the increase in our current account deficit is due to the global commodity prices. Now, we don't want to be late in trying to ensure that inflation expectations remain anchored. And therefore, we have raised rates by a cumulative 275 basis points since September. But we have also indicated in our monetary policy statement as forward guidance that now we're going to take a pause. We are going to take a pause to first look at the effects of the tightening that we have already done. And then we will consider what monetary policy settings should be afterwards. I should also point out that fiscal policy has been very complementary and is also withdrawing stimulus. So a coordinated macroeconomic response, we think, will, number one, sustain recovery and keep inflation broadly in check as well.
Governor, you just actually mentioned that most of this inflation is coming from these supply chain constraints. And the thing is, you also got an informal economy, which is huge. What really, do interest rate hikes actually work? They haven't even helped really the rupee. I mean, you could easily say, well, if we hadn't done that, then we'd be in even more of a mess. But the thing is, the rupee's gone to record lows. And on top of that, we've got this huge deficit you just mentioned. Doesn't actually the motor of the Pakistani economy be resistant to some extent by the cost of borrowing?
Rishaad, economic policy is all about trade-offs, number one, and it is about the counterfactual. But let me clarify the premise of your question a bit. The recent weakening of the rupee, which is about 10% since this calendar year, overstates the extent of the weakening because we transitioned from a fixed exchange rate to a market-based exchange rate system in June of 2019. So it's gone up, it's gone down. Year to date, on average, the rupee is around 162. And this is about the same level last year from January to December. So that's the first point, that on average, the rupee year to date today is roughly where it was last year. My second point is that a market-based exchange rate has served as a good shock absorber and has actually allowed the central bank to build reserves. And that's what matters when you're looking at the outlook for the currency. When we transitioned to a flexible exchange rate in June of 2019, we had reserves of 7 billion, Rishaad. Today, we have reserves of more than 19 billion. That's more than double. At the same time, we have reduced our short forward position, which is an off-balance sheet item, which we report monthly on our website as well. So my point is that in looking at the outlook for the exchange rate, it is important to look at reserve coverage. And finally, we expect that as the combined effort of our policies takes effect, the pressure on the rupee will abate as domestic demand moderates.
Governor, if you could just employ a degree of brevity, just looking at also this IMF program, where are you with that? I mean, it seems that Pakistan has to be constantly going to the IMF. You know, how does the country wean itself off the body?
Extremely important question, Rishaad. And to be brief, Pakistan's history was one of boom-bust cycles, and a large part was that policy response used to be delayed to external shocks. In particular, with a fixed exchange rate system, you would not be able to adjust the current account. With a market-based exchange rate system, since May, when our current account deficit exceeded May, The exchange rate has already been adjusting, and we've tightened a cumulative 275 basis points. With these measures, we are quite confident that unlike in the past, this growth of 5% is going to be stable, and we expect 4 to 6% growth next year as well, with a fully financed current account deficit.
Yeah, and there has been some opposition, Governor, that the IMF's condition that you increase central bank autonomy. How important is that, and how does that improve the functioning for the central bank?
The bill for the central bank autonomy has not been presented to Parliament yet. The debate will start, and I think we would want the Parliament to only pass a bill that is in the good for Pakistan. The key provisions of the bill are, number one, to clarify the objectives of the central bank. Number two, to give it operational autonomy. And number three, to hold it accountable, in particular, to Parliament.
Tell me, Governor, you've also seen a record funding take place in the fintech and other tech spaces or just startups in Pakistan. How is that at the moment playing out for you?
It's a very exciting space, Rishaad. Pakistan is a country with 187 million mobile subscribers, and a country where about 80 million have bank accounts. So about 100 million easily are those people who have a cell phone, but they don't have a bank account. We've seen very brisk activity in the fintech scene. More than 300 million has been raised this year compared to around 50, 60 million last year. On the central bank side, we've made it easy to bring money in, but more importantly, also to take money out when it is time to disinvest. We're coming out also with a digital banking framework this month, and for the first time, Pakistan is going to have the likes of Challenger and Neo banks. So we are very excited about the digital economy space in Pakistan. So please continue to watch this space.
Governor, I want to ask you a little bit more about just taking a pause after these 3 rate hikes you've seen. What are going to be the conditions that you need to see for you to continue to this rate hiking path once again? I mean, you continue to see this current account deficit that widens and rising inflation, but what's going to be that swing factor for you to get back on this hiking cycle?
Number one, we want to see the developments with the current account. A key cause behind the pressure on the rupee has been the widening of the current account. Some part of the current account weakening is not in our control, such as global commodity prices. But with a number of central banks around the world now beginning to tighten, and as you said, we are definitely not in the latecomers club, we are hoping that there'll be some easing on global commodity prices. But number one, we will look at the current account deficit outturns. Number two, we will look at inflation outturns. Number three, we will look at outturns of economic activity. As you know, central bank is a fine balancing act, and we will factor in all these 3 considerations before deciding what is the next course of monetary policy.
Absolutely. And, we talk about monetary policy, but I want to get a sense of where you guys are right now in the crypto space. Are you planning to regulate it further? What's the deal?
It's a very active debate going on right now, Rishaad. From a regulatory perspective, it is not a medium of exchange, but we have a lot of requests of people who want to mine and people who want actually to liberalize it. Even one of our high courts is looking at the issue as well. So it would not be appropriate to comment on it right now, except to state that we are looking at it very closely, and except also to note that a number of central banks around the world are being very cautious on crypto. They are a bit more tolerant towards stable coins. And the largest growing trend is towards central bank digital currencies as a way to harness the benefits of digitization and immediate settlement and a claim on the central bank, while avoiding the pitfalls that are coming with the crypto in many jurisdictions.